If one day people drag you into darkness just because of the color of your skin and your silence, what will you do if a powerful man lays his hands on you with contempt, thinking that no one will save you? Will you bow your head and endure, or stand up, knowing that you may lose everything? This story begins in a fancy restaurant where the bright lights hide the insults, where a black waitress thinks she can keep quiet and be safe. But everything changes when the manager drags her into the bathroom, unaware that the husband she calls a humble mechanic is actually Chicago's most notorious mafia boss. From an ordinary woman, Naomi Carter stepped out of the shadows with a calm, intelligence, and courage that the whole world looked back. She didn't just fight for herself. She toppled an entire network of corruption, proving that silence can be a weapon and that humility should never be underestimated. Are you strong enough to stand up for your values? When the world wants you to be silent, are you brave enough to face injustice? Not with a shout, but with wisdom and determination. Please like and share before reading the story below, because sometimes justice doesn't need to scream. It just needs a woman to dare to stand up in the darkness. Chicago at night has a special glow. It's not exactly bright, and it's not exactly gloomy. It's like the city's breath, rich, deep, and a little spicy like cheap bourbon in a corner bar. The Everly sits on Michigan Avenue, where the tempered glass reflects the sea of skyscrapers. Inside, pale gold crystal chandeliers, the soft clink of knives and forks, the smell of steak and expensive perfume. Everything is so perfect, it's almost artificial. Naomi Carter stood at the corner of the counter, adjusting her white apron. She looked around, her smile gentle, but her eyes taking in everything quietly. None of the customers knew she had a degree in social investigation from Northwestern University. They saw only a dark-skinned waitress with a soft voice and deft hands. "Naomi, bring the number 12 to Senator Glenn," said the manager. "Dean Walters," his voice cold and metallic. She nodded slightly, not looking at him. Dean always spoke as if she were invisible, a tool that could be ordered around at any time. Senator Glenn Richardson's desk was near the window. He laughed loudly, his gold ring glinting in the lamplight. Naomi set the bottle on the table and poured with skill. "Thank you, Miss Carter," he said, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. She smiled slightly, her voice soft. "It was a pleasure to serve you, sir." As Naomi turned to leave, Dean stood near the door, arms folded, watching her as if examining her every move. He was always looking for something to criticize a smile that was off, a step a second too late. Naomi passed the large mirror in the hallway. Her reflection made her pause. The woman in the mirror-brown skin, hair tied back, eyes quiet, didn't look like someone weak. Yet she pretended to be weak, because it was the only role she could play to survive in this place. Dean approached, his voice low. "You know, Naomi, the customers here like obedience. They don't need morals." Naomi smiled slightly. "I'm just doing my job. Mr. Walters." He smirked. "Yeah, and don't forget, this job isn't for everyone, especially someone like you." She knew what someone like you meant. Each word was like a knife wrapped in velvet. She turned away, her breathing even. His every word was recorded in her mind, clear and crisp as a tape. Around 8:30, the restaurant was at its busiest. Slow jazz was playing. Naomi was clearing tables when Dean emerged from the back office. He nodded to Glenn Richardson, then glanced at her. She knew that look. It meant trouble. "Naomi," Dean called. "Come into my office for a moment." His voice was light, as if he were offering coffee, but his eyes held something else. The room was dimly lit. On the table was a white envelope. "Senator Glenn wanted to send you some." "Thanks," Dean said, pushing the envelope toward her. Naomi looked at it, was silent for a few seconds, then replied softly, "I can't accept it. I'm just an employee, and I don't do anything but work." Dean sneered. "Come on, Naomi. $5,000 won't hurt anyone, unless you want to hurt yourself." She remained calm. "I don't take dirty money. I think Mr. Richardson will understand." Dean looked at her, his smile gone. "Who do you think you are? A saint." He stepped closer, his breath smelling of tobacco. Naomi took a step back. "I just want to do the right thing." "Right," he sneered. "There is no right or wrong here. There are only the powerful and those who serve them." The yellow light fell on his face, half dark, half light. Naomi saw in Dean's eyes the cold light of someone used to oppressing others. She bowed her head, her voice low but firm. "I am not yours." Dean paused, his eyes darkening. "You'll regret that." Naomi left the office and walked out into the hallway. The air was fresher, but her heart was still pounding. She stopped by the bar, poured a glass of water, and drank slowly. In the distance, through the glass doors, the city was still sparkling with lights. People out there were probably laughing and loving, and she standing in a place so bright it felt suffocatingly dark. She touched the small watch on her wrist. The screen reflected the text that had been on earlier, recording active. A smile crossed his lips. Outside. Dean Walters continued to laugh and talk with his guests, and Naomi knew this was only the beginning. A long night had just begun, and she was ready. That night, it rained in Chicago. The rain fell in thin strands, and the street lights made it sparkle like silver dust. The traffic thinned, leaving only taxis lining Michigan Avenue. At the Everly, most of the guests had left. The clearing of tables echoed softly like the last breath of a long evening. Naomi Carter stood wiping glasses, her hands moving steadily, but her mind was no longer there. She remembered the white envelope on the table, remembered Dean Walters' half-smile. She knew he wouldn't stop. Men like Dean couldn't stand opposition, especially from a woman of color they considered inferior. The back office door closed with a dry click. Dean walked out, his suit jacket slightly rumpled, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked around, his eyes landing on Naomi. "Still here? I thought you were gone." Naomi set down her glass, her voice calm. "I have to clean up my area before I leave." "Mr. Walters." Dean nodded slightly, approaching the bar. The click of his heels echoed, eerie in the empty space. "You did well tonight." Senator Glenn was pleased. "He said you had an interesting attitude." Naomi didn't reply. Dean set his glass down on the bar, the slight clatter startling her. "But I have to be honest, Naomi, you disappointed me." She looked up, her dark eyes deep. "What did I do wrong?" Dean chuckled. "You know, it's disrespectful to refuse a gift. You've embarrassed me and him." Naomi let out a soft breath. "I just don't want to accept money I don't deserve. Don't deserve it." His voice changed, colder. "You think you're moral. You're here because I let you. One signature from me, and you're out of a job in 5 minutes." Naomi was silent. She could smell the alcohol and cigarettes in the air, heavy and suffocating. She knew this type of person well. Petty people who like to lord themselves over others. Dean continued slowly. "Tomorrow, I will need you to attend a private party with Mr. Richardson and a few of his friends. A private dinner. No questions asked. Just serve properly. Naomi knew what proper service meant. In her 2 years here, she had seen more than a few girls forced to please customers to keep their jobs. She raised her head and said firmly, "I'm sorry. I'm not participating." Dean froze, his eyes flashing with anger. "You should reconsider. Naomi, this isn't a suggestion. I've thought about it. You're killing yourself." Naomi put down her towel and looked straight at him. "I just don't want to be part of this filthy thing you call work." Dean moved closer, so close she could smell the strong scent of alcohol. "You think you're better than anyone here? You're just a black maid. I gave a chance to. Don't make me remind you where you belong." Naomi's grip tightened, but she remained calm. "I know who I am, and I know what kind of man you are." That was like a trigger. Dean slammed his glass down on the counter, shattering it. "Get out of here," he yelled. But when he saw she was still standing there, her eyes cold, he lowered his voice. "I'll say it again. If you don't cooperate, I'll make sure you have no place in the city to work. Understand?" Naomi looked straight at him. Her voice was light as air, but each word was clear. "I don't need you to define my future." Dean narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into a crooked smile. "Fine. Don't say I didn't warn you." He turned away, leaving her alone. She stood there, the yellow light reflecting off her slightly trembling hands, but within seconds, her breathing returned to normal. She picked up the broken glass, threw it in the trash, then carefully took her phone from her pocket. The screen read, "Recording saved successfully." Naomi turned off the monitor, put the phone away, and walked out the back door. The rain was still falling. A cold wind blew, lightly ruffling her hair. She pulled up the collar of her jacket and took a deep breath. On the sidewalk, a black car stopped at the curb. The door opened. The driver bowed and said softly, "Mrs. Carter, the boss is waiting at home." Naomi nodded and got in. She looked out the window, the shimmering light reflecting on her face, both calm and tired. Her house was in the northern suburbs of Chicago, where the only sounds were from Lake Michigan and the smell of young pine trees. The mansion was large and eerily silent. When the car stopped, Naomi stepped through the dark wooden door. In the living room, Luca Marino sat reading the newspaper. His suit was impeccable, his tie loose, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the table. He looked up when she entered, his eyes cold but softening quickly. "You're late." "Yes, the restaurant is crowded." Luca studied her for a moment. "Is Dean Walters bothering you again?" Naomi hesitated. "He gave you an envelope from Glenn Richardson. I refused, and he wasn't happy." Luca raised an eyebrow. "I told you to stay away from him. That kind of person isn't worth your time." Naomi sat down on the chair opposite, took off her apron, and said in a low voice, "I don't want you involved. I can handle it myself." Luca sipped his whiskey, his eyes still on her. "Naomi, sometimes you forget that Chicago isn't a place run by morals. It's run by fear, and I know that better than anyone." Naomi looked at him. "I know, but if everyone is afraid, nothing will ever change." Luca was silent. He looked at her face, soft but steady, like streetlight reflected in water. Finally, he sighed and set his glass down. "I just want you to be safe." Naomi smiled softly, a tired but warm smile. "I'm fine." But deep down, she knew the calm was just a thin layer of mist. Beneath it, a storm was waiting to be unleashed. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside the house, Yellow light cast shadows on the walls of two people. One, a former powerful criminal, the other an unlikely war-torn man. And between them, silence hung like a broken thread. Naomi touched the small watch on her wrist, where she kept the recording set. Tonight, she saved another segment, not out of fear, but because she was beginning to see the path she was taking more clearly. The road to justice is never bright, but she knows it's worth the journey. Chicago mornings always brought a damp chill that seeped through the gaps in her clothes. Naomi Carter stepped out of the car, her breath billowing like smoke. She looked up at the Everlay building, its golden sign gleaming in the morning sun. From a distance, the restaurant still looked luxurious and splendid as ever, but to her, the place now felt like a trap. She walked in, and everyone was already there. There was chatter, clinking dishes, and faint jazz music. Dean Walters stood near the counter, his shirt white, his tie neatly tied. He was talking to another employee, but when he saw Naomi pass, his eyes flickered over cold as steel. Naomi nodded slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Walters," Dean replied with a forced smile. "You're early. There are many important guests today. I hope you don't cause any more trouble. I'll do my part." "Well, let's hope so." The air between them was thick and tense. Naomi walked toward the kitchen, grabbing the tray of glasses, but she could feel Dean's eyes on her. At noon, the restaurant was packed. Naomi moved quickly between tables, smiling softly, skillfully avoiding the prying eyes of the customers. Everything was normal, until Dean called out to her. "Naomi, come here for a moment." She set the tray down and headed for the small back office. Dean closed the door, the click of the latch startling her. "What's the matter, Mr. Walters? You still don't understand what cooperation is?" "Do you?" Dean asked, his voice low. She looked at him, her eyes calm. "I followed the rules." Dean stepped closer, his voice low but clear. "I told you to attend the evening with Senator Richardson, and you sent a refusal through your staff. Are you trying to defy me? I just can't do it." "Can't or won't." Naomi was silent. Dean's eyes seemed to pierce into the depths of her mind. He suddenly sneered. "You think you're so smart, but you're forgetting something. I can make every restaurant in this city refuse to hire you." "One call is all it takes," Naomi replied softly. "If that's how you want to prove your power, then go ahead," Dean sneered. "You will regret it, Naomi." He stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. "I will show you where you stand." Naomi jerked her hand. "Let go." But Dean pulled hard, dragging her toward the hallway that led to the employee restroom. The hallway was narrow, lit only by dim light from the overhead lights. She struggled, her shoes scuffing on the stone floor. "What are you doing?" Dean held her tight. "You need to learn to respect your elders." The bathroom door opened, and he pushed her in. The door slammed shut loudly. The small space smelled of soap and bleach. Naomi backed up to the sink, her hands gripping the wooden edge. Dean stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "You think you can fight me? There's no one here. Naomi, no one can save you." She looked straight at him. "I don't need saving." "Really?" Dean chuckled, stepping closer. "Then pray. In that moment." Naomi stopped breathing. Her heart pounded, but her eyes remained calm. She knew, if she showed her fear, he would win. Dean reached out, but she suddenly spun around, yanking his hand off her shoulder. Enough, her voice rang out, strong and firm. Dean paused for a second, then laughed. "You have guts? You think you can fight me with that?" Naomi looked at him. "No, I have proof." Dean blinked. What you remember last night. So the security cameras in your office. I have them all backed up. Dean looked startled, then grinned. You're lying. Check it, Naomi replied evenly. If you're sure you're innocent, check the cameras. Dean looked at her, his eyes wavering. For a moment, he seemed to lose control. You will regret it, Naomi Carter, she replied softly. Maybe, but not today. Dean took a step forward, his hand about to touch her, and just then, a sound came from outside the door, the heavy, decisive sound of leather boots. The door swung open. Light from the hallway flooded in, making Dean stop. A deep, cold male voice rang out. I think you should take your hands off my wife. Naomi turned. Luca Marino stood in the doorway, a dark suit and tie, his eyes like knives. Behind him, 2 other men in black suits stood silently, tall and broad-shouldered. Dean let go of his hand and took a step back, his face pale. Who are you? Luca didn't answer. He just took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Dean. I'll say it one last time. Let go, Dean stammered. I didn't do anything. She misunderstood. Naomi backed away, taking a deep breath. The air became thick, except for the sound of water dripping from the sink. Luca stood in front of Dean, his voice low. Do you think I don't know what you're doing here? I've been watching this restaurant for a long time, and I know exactly what you've done. Dean looked around, sweating. You have no right, Luca interrupted. I have the right to protect my wife. No one said anything. The atmosphere in the small room became as heavy as stone. Naomi looked at Luca. His eyes were cold, but there was a hint of worry in them, something only she could see. Dean bowed his head, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Keep that apology, Luca said, turning to Naomi. Are you okay? She nodded. I'm okay. Luca gestured. 2 men behind him stepped forward and grabbed Dean's shoulders. He struggled. What are you doing? Let me go. I'll sue. Luca turned back and said softly, I just want to talk, somewhere quieter. Dean was dragged out of the room. Naomi stopped, her hand lightly touching the sink, a cold feeling spreading through her body. Luca turned and stepped closer, his voice low. You should go home. Naomi looked at him, her eyes deep. What did you do to him? Nothing. No, Luca said, and turned away. She understood him. When Luca said not yet, it meant things were just beginning. She stood still for a moment, then walked out of the bathroom. The hallway was still lit, but a vague unease was stirring in her heart. She had not just escaped one nightmare, she had entered another. That night, as she left the restaurant, Naomi didn't look back, but in her mirror, she saw Everly's yellow headlights spilling onto the rain-soaked road. It wasn't a light anymore. It was like the first crack in a crumbling castle. She knew, from the moment Luca walked in, things would never be the same. Dean Walters was dragged away by 2 men in black suits, leaving the restaurant staff in shock. No one dared to ask a question. The atmosphere in the Everly was as heavy as a storm. A few remaining customers glanced at him, then quickly lowered their heads to their plates, pretending not to see anything. In a place for the rich, people always knew when to keep quiet. Naomi Carter stood in the hallway, her hands still shaking slightly. She had not yet processed what had just happened. The image of Dean squeezing her hand in the bathroom was still fresh in her mind, but at the same time, the image of Luca walking in, cold, decisive, made her heart beat with a complex, indescribable emotion. Luca always appeared just in time, as if he knew everything. But that also scared her, because there was something too quiet, too dark about Luca. As the crowd dispersed, Luca stepped forward, saying nothing. He placed his hand on Naomi's shoulder, lightly, but enough for her to feel its weight. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I just need a few minutes." He nodded slightly, his voice low. "I'll take care of the rest." "You should go." Naomi looked at him, wanting to say something, but his eyes, calm, cold, without a trace of anger, made her unable to. She only whispered, "Please don't do anything stupid." Luca didn't reply, just turned away. The way he walked, slow and steady, made it difficult to tell whether it was the gait of a successful businessman or a hunting wolf. Naomi returned to the dressing room and removed her apron. Her face reflected in the mirror, pale, but her eyes brighter and more alert than ever. She was used to fear, but today it took on a different shape. It took the shape of the man she loved. Outside, the rain had stopped. The storm air smelled of damp earth and cigarette smoke wafted from street corners. She walked to the back parking lot. From a distance, she saw Luca's 2 men standing next to the black car, and Dean forced to kneel in a puddle, his hands bound with plastic. Luca stood still, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cigarette. The flickering firelight illuminated his face eerily calm. Naomi stopped behind the glass door of the hallway, watching. Her heart was pounding, but her legs wouldn't move. "You made a big mistake," Luca said slowly, his voice echoing in the quiet night. Dean trembled. I didn't know she was your wife. I'm sorry. I swear. I didn't mean to. Didn't know." Luca stepped closer, leaning down, his voice steady. "You don't need to know. But you did. And that's enough." Naomi couldn't hear what they said next, but she saw the glint of a small knife in one of the men's hands. She panicked and pushed the door open. "Luca." He turned. In an instant, his eyes changed color from cold to soft. He signaled for the other man to stop. Naomi stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "You don't have to do that. You know you shouldn't." Luca looked at her for a few seconds, then slowly put out his cigarette, signaling for the 2 men to let Dean go. Dean fell to the ground, coughing, his face pale. Naomi bent down, looking at him. "Get out of here, now, and don't ever come back." Dean looked at her, his mouth trembling. I'll be quiet. I promise." "No," Naomi said. "You'll live with what you did." "Every day?" Dean ran off, his wet shoes splashing in the puddle. Naomi watched, relieved and heavy-hearted. Luca stood behind her, silent. "Finally," he said, "you're still the same. Always forgiving. Even when you shouldn't." Naomi turned back. "I didn't forgive him. I just didn't want you to make a mistake. A mistake you'd regret for the rest of your life." He was silent, then nodded. The words reminded him the last time he'd lost control. It had been bloody. They left the parking lot together. Silence filled the car. Luca drove, eyes fixed on the road. Naomi sat beside him, hands clasped together. Finally, she spoke. "You were following me. You were protecting me. It was like stalking." Luca glanced over, his gaze fleeting. What would have happened if I hadn't been there? Naomi didn't respond. She looked out the window, the city lights receding like slow motion. After a few minutes of silence, Luca said, "I know Dean isn't the only problem. That restaurant is a front. People like Richardson are laundering money through it. I wanted to keep my distance. But now, you're involved." Naomi turned, surprised. What did you say Everly is more than a restaurant? It's a conduit for political bribes. Naomi gasped. And how long have you known long enough to know no one gets away with this untainted? She looked at him, her voice low but clear. You too. Luca didn't say anything. He just gripped the wheel harder. When they got home, Naomi got out first. She stood under the porch, the yellow light illuminating her tired face. I don't need you to clear the way for me, she said softly. I want to face them myself. You're playing a dangerous game. Maybe, but someone has to do what's right. Luca stepped closer, his eyes softening. I can't let you get hurt. Naomi looked at him, her voice choked. You can protect me, but you can't protect my soul. If I have to stay silent in the face of wrongs. He paused. The remark left him unable to refute. In the end, he simply reached out and touched her cheek. A brief touch, then turned away. As the door closed behind Naomi, she stood still, her heart in turmoil. The hallway light fell on the floor, casting her shadow down the stairs. She knew that from tonight on, the line between love and justice would be more fragile than ever. And Luca, the man who just saved her from the bad guys, is the one who is keeping her in a cage of power. That night, Naomi didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, turned on her computer, and reviewed the recordings from her phone. Dean's voice came through the speaker, hoarse and vulgar, mixed with the rustling of envelopes. She saved it all, naming the file, Everly Case. 1. A cold breeze blew through the half-open window. Naomi looked up and out. The city was bathed in yellow light filtering through the mist. In the darkness, she found herself on a path with no return. But in the dim light, she still believed, however bumpy the path, it would lead to justice, or at least lead her to the truth. The next morning, a weak light filtered through the curtains into the Marino kitchen's tidy kitchen. Naomi Carter stood silently before the coffee pot, bubbling steadily. The smell of coffee mixed with the scent of oak wood made a pleasant aroma, but her mind was in turmoil. She hadn't slept all night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dean's eyes, his pale face when he dragged her out of the bathroom, and Luca's face so cold it was almost unfamiliar. Luca walked in, wearing a white shirt, holding his phone. He walked toward her, his voice low but clear as he spoke. No, I don't want the police involved. It should be handled internally. Okay, let me decide. He hung up, looking at Naomi. You're up too early. I can't sleep. Luca nodded, pulling up a chair and sitting down at the table. Me neither. They were silent. Only the sound of the clock on the wall and the dripping coffee. Naomi poured 2 cups, pushing one toward him. Dean won't dare come back, Luca said. You made sure of that. Naomi sat down opposite him, looking at him intently. How can you make sure you have people who know how to make people understand? Understanding or fear? Naomi asked, her voice low but clear. Luca paused, his eyes fixed on her. Sometimes, fear is the only thing that makes the world go round. She didn't reply. From anyone else, she might have objected, but from Luca, it was too true. He put down his coffee and stood up. Don't go back to Everly. Naomi frowned. You can't just quit like that. I don't need to. You'll take care of it. You'll make them think I got promoted or transferred. No, she said immediately. I'm not leaving. I need to know what's really going on there. Luca looked at her, his eyes a mixture of helplessness and admiration. What do you want to do? Naomi took a deep breath, her voice calm but determined. I'll keep going. I'll act like nothing happened. I'll document everything. The people who came and went, the shady dealings, the private parties Dean mentioned. You're playing with fire, Naomi. Maybe, but if everyone's afraid, no one can put out that fire." He was silent. She saw in his eyes genuine worry, which he rarely showed. But she knew. Deep down, he was still a man of darkness, a man who understood the rules of this cruel world. "I promise," he said softly. "If anything happens, you will call me. Immediately." Naomi nodded, then stood. "I promise." In the afternoon, the Everly was lit up again. Naomi returned to her usual waitressing form. Everyone looked at her strangely. After last night's incident, everyone suspected something bigger had happened, but no one dared to ask. Dean's chair was empty in the office. A new temporary employee had arrived, Vincent Keller, a tall, middle-aged man with a cold face and wise eyes. He smiled when Naomi knocked on the door. "Ah, Naomi Carter. I hear you're the best employee here." "Thank you. I'm just trying to do my job." "Keep going," Vincent said, his voice friendly but with something that made her feel uncomfortable. In the evening, while Naomi was clearing tables in the VIP area, she saw a group of men walk in. They were wearing suits and gold watches, talking softly but laughing loudly. In the middle of them was a fat man with silver hair and a large ring on his hand. She recognized him immediately, Senator Glenn Richardson. She stood still, her heart pounding. He had offered her an envelope a few days ago, and she had refused. Richardson's eyes met hers, lingering for a moment. Then he smiled, raising his glass. "Oh, the little waitress from the other day. I hope you'll be more comfortable this time." Naomi smiled softly, her voice polite. "I am always happy to serve guests, sir." Richardson smiled, his eyes fixed on her. "Good. I hope you understand what cooperation means." As she turned away, she heard them whisper, "Vincent will take care of the rest. Dean has said too much." Naomi took in every word. Late at night, when the restaurant was empty, Naomi sneaked into the back storage room where she'd seen Vincent and Richardson enter earlier. The door was ajar, and she heard a low murmur of conversation. "The money will be transferred to an account through a shell company. They won't be able to trace it. And Dean, it's been handled. He's not going to say anything." Naomi took out her phone and turned on the recorder. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes were bright, both scared and determined. A small noise behind her startled her. She turned and saw Vincent standing there, hands in his pockets, a half smile on his face. "What are you doing here?" "Naomi." She held her breath, hiding her phone behind her. I was looking for a towel." "In the back room, in the place with all the files and the safe." Vincent slowed his steps, his voice low. "Dean was right. You're dangerously curious." Naomi took a step back, her voice calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." Vincent smiled lightly, but his eyes were cold as ice. "It's better you don't know." As he approached, Naomi turned and ran. Her heels echoed on the tiled floor, and Vincent called out behind her, "Stop!" "Naomi." She didn't stop. She dashed out the back door, the cold wind hitting her face. Outside, the parking lot was deserted, except for the dim yellow light of the streetlights. She opened her phone and quickly texted, "He knows. I'm leaving Everly. Meet me at the rendezvous point." She sent it, then hung up. Behind her, the door opened and Vincent stepped out, his eyes darting around. Naomi hid behind the car, her heart pounding. She waited for him to pass, then made her way down the alley. She knew every nook and cranny of the neighborhood. She had worked here for 2 years. She knew how to get out. At the end of the alley, a black car was parked. The door was open. Luca was sitting inside, his eyes tense. Naomi quickly got in, closed the door, and breathed heavily. "I got a text message," Luca said, starting the car. "What happened, Vincent Keller? He knows you're recording." Luca gritted his teeth. "I warned you. You can be angry later. Now you need to hear this." Naomi opened her phone and played the recording. Richardson's voice rang out clearly. "The money will be transferred through a shell company. They won't be able to trace it." Luca was silent throughout the recording. When the audio died down, he said softly, "You just touched a hornet's nest." Naomi looked away, her voice tired but firm. "If we don't put it out, no one will touch it again." The car sped off into the night. Outside, the lights of Chicago glinted on the wet pavement. For a brief moment, Naomi realized she had just stepped deeper into a world she had only ever seen from afar. But this time, she's not just a bystander. She's rewriting the rules of the game. The car glided through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. Neon lights from bars streaked through the glass, painting Naomi's face. She was silent, still clutching the phone with the recording. Luca Marino sat beside her, his hands gripping the wheel, his eyes as tense as a broken string. "Do you know what you just did?" His voice was hoarse and heavy as steel. Naomi turned and replied slowly, "You know better than anyone." "No, I don't," Luca said, his eyes still on the road. "Richardson isn't the type to just use power. He has guns and blood. I just put myself in his crosshairs." Naomi looked out the window. The streetlights were fading behind the raindrops. "I used to live in fear, Luca, and I don't want to live like that anymore." Her words made him fall silent. He slowly exhaled, his eyes softening, but his voice remained low. "You are strong, but strong does not mean safe." Naomi turned to look at him, her eyes bright but sad. "What about you? Are you safe in your world?" Luca didn't answer. The question was like an invisible knife touching an old wound inside him. The car stopped in front of an old building on the outskirts of town, an abandoned warehouse by the river. Luca opened the door and got out. "Let's go. It's safer here." Naomi followed, stepping into the dark space, where the weak light from the hanging round bulbs was reflected. In the corner, a few men were examining documents, several laptops open. A middle-aged man approached. "Boss, we have decrypted some of the data from Everly's account. There are traces of money being transferred to a shell company called Lincrest Holdings." Luca nodded. "Good. Keep monitoring. Don't leave any traces." Naomi looked around, suddenly realizing Luca was more than just the powerful man she knew. He was the center of a network that operated in the shadows, smart, organized, and dangerous. She walked closer to him and asked softly, "You were following Everly before I worked there?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the fewer people who know, the fewer people who get hurt." Naomi smiled faintly. "But now you're involved." Luca turned to look at her. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed with something between worry and pride. "You're not just involved, Naomi. You've become the key." That night, Luca and his team examined the data Naomi had recorded. On the screen, a series of hidden bank transactions appeared, money laundered through shell companies, ending up in the pockets of politicians. Naomi watched the data stream on the screen, a shiver running down her spine. This is their true scale. Luca nodded. Everly is just a small piece. Richardson is at the top of the chain, but he has backers. One name hasn't come out yet. And what are you going to do? I'll let them reveal themselves. But I need time. And you. Naomi looked at him, her voice low. Are you going to use me as bait? Luca was silent, then replied softly. I was going to let you be someone they wouldn't expect. She looked at him, unsure whether to fear or trust him. Deep down, she knew Luca wasn't lying. He was just doing what came naturally to someone who had lived so long in the shadows, protecting by controlling. Do you think I'm a pawn? She said, her voice choking. No. Naomi. He stepped forward, taking her shoulder gently. You're the only one who makes me believe the world is still worth saving. She looked at him, her heart pounding. There was something so true in his voice, but at the same time, she knew Luca's love always came at a high price. 3 days later, Naomi returned to the Everly as if nothing had happened. Everything seemed strangely normal. Richardson was nowhere to be seen, and Vincent seemed friendlier than usual. Naomi, I hear you studied accounting in college, Vincent asked during a break. Yes. Great. I need someone trustworthy to go through some of Dean's old books. Just to clean up. Can you help me? Naomi pretended to think, then nodded. Of course. I'll try. Vincent smiled, but his eyes remained searching. Naomi knew he didn't trust her. Maybe he was just testing. That evening, she was taken into Dean's small office, which was now locked. Vincent handed her a stack of notebooks and left, saying softly, Don't stay too late. As the door closed, Naomi opened the ledger and turned on the camera on her phone. Numbers appeared, hidden expenses signed with different initials, and one name made her pause. LM. Her heart clenched. Those 2 letters, so familiar. Luca Marino. She turned the page. A small note. In a different handwriting, contact LM to confirm shipment 3. She staggered. For a few seconds, everything seemed to collapse. Luca, is he in on this too? Or are you manipulating from the inside? She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was someone else. But in the back of her mind, a nagging doubt began to creep in. She took in the image and left the office before Vincent returned. Stepping outside, the night wind hit her face, cold and stinging. That night, Naomi went to see Luca at the old warehouse. He was standing at the table, the yellow light illuminating his serious face. I have something. She handed him her phone and opened the photo in her notebook. Luca glanced at it, then fell silent. Naomi asked softly, Who is LM? Luca. He didn't answer right away. The room fell silent. Then he said slowly, LM isn't you, but someone is using your name to conduct business. Are you sure? Or, he paused, his eyes narrowing, someone in the organization is turning on you. Naomi looked at him, unsure whether to believe him or not. He moved closer, placing his hand on her shoulder. I swear to you, Naomi, I never took any money from them. But if someone uses my name, this is more dangerous than we thought. She nodded, but her heart was still heavy. A feeling of unease clung to her, not because of the enemy outside, but because of something growing between them, suspicion. Luca turned away, his voice low. I will find out who is behind this. But from now on, you cannot act alone. Naomi looked at him and replied softly, If you don't hide anything from me, I promise. Luca turned, his eyes lingering on her face. and a smile appeared on his face, sad and gentle. "You have always been the only bright part of my life." She was silent, looking out the window. Outside, Chicago was still bright, but the light was not enough to show who was truly on the side of light. Night fell slowly over Chicago. The streets were still brightly lit, but in Naomi and Luca's small house, the soft yellow light was heavy. Naomi sat by the window, her eyes lost in space. She heard the sound of water in the bathroom, Luca's footsteps, and the silence that crept between them. Ever since she discovered the symbol LM in the ledger, her heart has not been at peace for a single moment. Even though Luca denied it, every glance and every silence between them made her feel the distance growing. Luca stepped out, his shirt unbuttoned, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked at her and said softly, "You're not asleep yet." Naomi shook her head slightly. "I'm thinking about what we're doing. I think you're lying to me." She turned back, her eyes lifting to meet his cold gaze. "I'm just trying to understand why everything is too perfect to be a coincidence, and why you always know one step ahead." Luca was silent, then slowly sat down across from her. He poured more wine, his voice even and low. "Have you forgotten who I was? I was born into a world where you had to anticipate every move if you wanted to survive. There are no such things as coincidences, Naomi. It's just who makes the first move." Naomi sighed. "I don't want to live in that world." "But you're already in it," Luca said, his eyes glinting with pain. "And I'm trying to keep you from being swallowed up." Another moment of silence. Outside, the sound of car horns gradually faded away, leaving only the steady ticking of the clock. Naomi looked at the glass of wine in front of her, her voice low but firm. "If you really want to protect me, don't hide anything from me." Luca put down his glass and moved closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I've lost too many people, Naomi. I can't let you become a memory, too." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "I don't want to be a memory. I want to be real." Luca paused at that. For a moment, he saw himself in her eyes strong, but afraid of something. He nodded slightly. "Okay, I'll tell you. But from this moment on, you must understand what you hear will change the way you look at me forever." Naomi swallowed and nodded. Luca stood up, walked to the cabinet, opened the secret compartment behind the wood. He took out a thick, old file, filled with pictures and documents. He placed it on the table. "This is the real reason I approached Everly," he said. "Not for business, not for power, for revenge." Naomi froze. "Revenge against who?" "The man behind Richardson. Someone you once called your godfather." He opened the file. Inside was a picture of an old man, with silver hair and a powerful face. Salvatore Mancini. He was the one who raised me from a young age. He brought me into this world. But when I discovered that he was using his organization to manipulate politics, sell information and kill people to silence them, I protested, and he had his brother killed. Naomi stared at the photo. She could hear the pain in Luca's voice, a pain that had been hidden beneath a calm veneer for years. "You left the organization," he continued, "and set up your own network. From there, you secretly followed Mancini. Richardson was just one of his pawns, and the LM in the ledger, maybe it was his way of sending you a message that you could never escape." Naomi was silent. The story was too big, too dark. But now, the pieces began to fit together. She looked at him. Her voice choked. "Did you endure it all alone?" Luca smiled softly. "Not sad. Until I met you, I thought I could start over. But now, I see clearly, there is no start over, for someone like me. Naomi stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest. You can stop. Luca, revenge only deepens the wound. He looked at her, his eyes a mixture of love and despair. No, Naomi, I can't stop while Mancini is still breathing. But you can. You have a future. You make it sound like you've already chosen your own death. Maybe, he said softly, then smiled. But if I have to die, I want to die knowing you're free. Naomi felt her throat tighten. She wanted to scream, to stop him. But she understood Luca had lived in the darkness for so long that the light now frightened him. She turned away, wiping away a tear that had fallen. If I help you, will it end? I don't know, Luca replied. But at least it will start to change. Out, The next day, Naomi returned to Everly with a different attitude. No longer just a servant seeking justice, but someone carrying both their pains. Vincent met her at the bar, a faint smile on his lips. You look different today. Different seems. Calmer. People about to do something reckless often have that look in their eyes, Naomi replied with a thin smile. Or maybe I'm just tired. Maybe, Vincent said, leaning toward her, his voice low. Richardson is coming tonight. There are some people who want to see him. If you're smart, you'll be out of here before the lights go out. Naomi looked at him, a glint in her eyes. Thanks for the advice, but I'm not one to run away. Vincent chuckled. It's not easy. Like Luca Marino. Naomi paused. What did you say? Vincent shrugged and walked away. But the words echoed in her head like thunder. That evening, after the restaurant closed, Naomi stood backstage, watching the group enter the VIP room. Richardson sat in the middle, flanked by two strange men. She secretly turned on the tape recorder, her heart pounding. Richardson's voice rang out Keller. The Everlay thing is almost done. Mancini wants to clean up the mess. If Luca Marino finds out, we'll have more bodies on our hands. The words made Naomi freeze. She couldn't believe her ears. Things were spiraling out of control. She left the room, grabbed her phone, and texted Luca. Mancini is cleaning. Richardson specifically mentioned you. You have to leave. Before the message was sent, a rough hand grabbed her shoulder. Vincent stood right behind her, his eyes cold as ice. I told you to leave, before the lights went out. Naomi. She tried to scream, but he covered her mouth and yanked her into the dark hallway. The door slammed shut, and then there was silence. Across town, Luca looked at his phone. A text message appeared, unsent. He stood up, his heart pounding. Naomi, he called softly, but only the sound of rain answered. When Naomi opened her eyes, she was met with the dim light of a closed room. The air smelled of disinfectant and rust. Her hands were tied to an iron chair, and her head throbbed. She tried to move, but the ropes were so tight that her skin stung. A voice spoke out of the darkness, slow and somewhat sarcastic. Good morning, Naomi Carter. Naomi squinted, noticing Vincent Keller stepping out from the corner of the room. His gray suit was still neat, but his eyes were sharp and cold as knives. He held a cup of coffee, leisurely, as if this was just a social meeting. What do you want? Naomi asked hoarsely. To help you understand whose world you've entered? Vincent put down his glass and leaned in. You think you can record, get information, and walk away like you're the good guy in some movie? Naomi smiled faintly, though her lip was bleeding. At least I'm not someone who sells my soul for power. Vincent smiled, not angry. You're right, but you're wrong about one thing. I don't sell my soul. I rent it, and Mancini is the highest-paying tenant." The name made Naomi shiver. "Salvatore Mancini," she repeated, almost in a whisper. "Ah, so Luca told you," Vincent said, his voice as light as a breeze. "I guess he didn't say it was Mancini who brought him to the top, then threw him to hell. And now he's playing a dangerous game, betraying the one who raised him." Naomi was silent, but her eyes flashed with rebellion. "If you think I'm going to say anything about Luca, you're wrong," Vincent laughed, shaking his head. "I don't need you to talk. I just need you to do send a message. A message that will convince Luca that you're safe. So he'll appear where we want him." Naomi glared at him. "He'll know it's a trap." Vincent sneered. "You don't understand, Luca. That man, if he knew you were in danger, he'd walk into hell without a second thought." He pulled her phone from his pocket and turned on the screen. "You'll text. I'm fine. Meet me at the old warehouse tonight." Naomi bit her lip, blood seeping from it. "I won't do that." Vincent sighed softly, then cocked his head. A large man stepped forward, a small, gleaming knife in his hand. "I don't like violence, but my boss believes in persuasion through pain." Naomi remained silent, her eyes straight, without a trace of fear. Vincent looked at her, and for a moment he saw in her something he did not have: trust. He said slowly, "I will give you one chance. If you do not send the message, he will die without ever knowing you are still alive." Naomi closed her eyes, her breathing ragged. She knew Luca would never stop. And if he came, he would fall into a trap. But if he didn't, she would never have a chance to survive. She opened her eyes and looked straight at Vincent. "Give me the phone." He chuckled and dropped the phone into her hand. Naomi shook slightly, texted the exact message he was reading, and sent it. Once the message was sent, she raised her head. "Now let me go." Vincent smiled and stepped back. "You're brave. Naomi, I understand why Luca is so infatuated with you, but unfortunately, courage doesn't save anyone from Mancini." He gestured to the man behind him. A hard blow stunned Naomi, and everything went black. Meanwhile, across town, Luca Marino was reviewing data from the tracking team. When his phone rang, he opened the message. "I'm fine. See you at the old warehouse tonight." He stood up immediately. "Prepare the car." The assistant beside him quickly asked, "Are you sure it could be a trap?" "Even if it is a trap," Luca said coldly, "I still have to go." That night, the first rain of the season fell, heavy and persistent. Luca's black car stopped in front of the old warehouse, the base where he and Naomi had once been based. The light from the headlights reflected off the mottled brick wall, streaks of water running like blood. He stepped down, his coat soaked, his hand clutching the gun hidden in his belt. It was dark inside, except for the faint light from the flickering flashlight. "Naomi," he called out, his voice echoing. There was no answer, only the sound of dripping water and the smell of mold. He stepped further inside, his boots clicking on the cold cement floor. Suddenly, the light turned on. In front of him was Vincent Keller, holding a gun, smiling coldly. "I knew you would come." "Luca." "Well, where is she?" Luca asked, his voice harsh. "Safe?" "For now. But you?" Vincent curled his lips. "Not." From behind, 3 more men stepped out, fully armed. Luca looked around, his body as tense as a bowstring. "You're still as reckless as ever," Vincent said. "Still believing in love like a fool." Luca slowly drew his gun. and you're as stupid as anyone who thinks you can touch her." Before Vincent could react, Luca pulled the trigger. A gunshot rang out. A bullet grazed Vincent's cheek and lodged itself in the crate behind him. Chaos ensued. The shots rang out, sharp and fierce. Dust flew. Lights flashed and died. Luca rolled behind a crate and changed the clip. Blood was running from his shoulder, but his eyes were sharp and focused. One of Vincent's gunmen fell. 2 others were hit. Vincent backed away, gasping for air. "You can't win. Luca Mancini knows you've betrayed her. He wants you to live long enough to see her die." Luca stood up, raised his gun, his voice low and cold as the winter wind. "If he wants to see it, tell him to look closely." He pulled the trigger. The bullet went through Vincent's shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Luca stepped forward, stepping on his hand. "Where is she?" Vincent chuckled. "Too late. Luca, they're taking her to Mancini." Luca clenched his fists, his face darkened. A trickle of blood from the wound dripped onto the cement floor. He said nothing, just bent down to pick up the phone from the floor where Vincent had fallen. On the screen was the still active GPS, Warehouse Dock 12. Luca took one last look at him, then turned away. Behind him, Vincent forced a weak smile. "You can't beat Mancini, Luca. He's darkness. You're just a lost man in the weak light of love." Luca paused, his voice low and resolute. "I don't need to overcome the darkness. I just need to pull her out of it." He walked away, his figure blending into the thick rain. The car started, the tires screeched, and shot into the night like a black bullet. In the rain, the car headlights reflected Luca's eyes, the eyes of a man with nothing left to lose, except the one he loves. The rain continued as Luca drove through the city's southern port district. Thunder rumbled overhead. Lightning flashed across the containers stacked like silent walls. The red dot on the navigation screen stopped at Dock 12. He turned off the engine, opened the door, and stepped out. The cold wind cut into his skin, seeping through his soaked shirt. Luca's eyes scanned the darkness, his steps cautious, but determined. He knew that inside there was more than just Naomi, but also the end of a past he had tried to forget. In the distance, 2 men in black stood guard at the warehouse gate. Luca silently pulled out a silenced gun, moving like a ghost. 2 clean shots. Both men fell without a sound. He stepped inside. The air was cold, smelling of oil and rust, and the only light from the overhead light bulb reflected off the wet cement floor. In the middle of the large room was an iron chair, where Naomi Carter lay tied, head bowed, hair disheveled. "Naomi," he called softly. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen, but still bright, both happy and worried. "Luca, I told you not to come. I knew you never listen." He walked quickly over, using a knife to cut the ropes. "We have to get out of here." She took his hand, her voice trembling. "Luca, you don't understand. He's coming. He wants to see you. He wants—" Footsteps sounded, steady and cold. The large door behind opened. Each heavy step echoed. And then Salvatore Mancini appeared. He was old, but still exuded a formidable authority. His black suit was impeccable, his silver hair combed back, his eyes sharp as daggers. Beside him were 2 large bodyguards, and behind him stood Vincent Keller, his shoulders bandaged, his face pale, but still managing a crooked smile. "I told you, Luca. In the end, you're still the same as the first day I met you, reckless and stupid," Mancini said, his voice low and filled with contempt. Luca helped Naomi to her feet, his eyes cold as ice. "If today is my last day, I at least want to see the devil's face clearly. And I, Mancini replied, want to see my ex-son die with my eyes open. Naomi turned to look at Luca, bewildered. A son, Luca took a deep breath. Not in a biological sense, but he raised me, taught me how to kill, how to manipulate, how to live like a beast in this underworld. And now he wants to bury me like a dog. Mancini smiled, approaching slowly. I don't want to kill you. Luca, I want you back. You were my pride, the only one who could look a gun in the eye and stay calm. But you betrayed me. For a woman. He glanced at Naomi, his smile growing colder. The woman who makes you forget who you are. If you think loving someone is weak, then you will never understand the true power of love, Naomi replied, her voice strong though her body trembling. Mancini chuckled dryly. Power love only makes one blind, and blindness leads to early death. Luca took a step forward, shielding Naomi. I was blind for so long to believe you were my father. Now I see clearly. The room fell into a tense silence. Mancini looked at Luca, his eyes slowly changing from cold to amused, then to angry. Fine. If you choose to side with her, then you will die with her. He signaled. The two guards drew their guns and aimed. But before they could pull the trigger, Luca pulled Naomi down and rolled behind the crate. Bullets rang out, ricocheting off the walls and floor. Luca countered. He fired back, each shot accurate. One fell instantly. The other was shot in the shoulder. Smoke and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Naomi crouched behind a crate, her heart racing, trying to stay calm. Vincent backed away from Mancini, his hands shaking. Boss, we should retreat. Shut up, Mancini roared, his eyes bloodshot. He must die here. Luca ran out of bullets, threw his gun aside, and lunged, punching one of the guards standing nearby. A fierce struggle broke out, bones cracking. He was hit hard in the stomach and fell. Naomi screamed, trying to find a weapon, her hand hitting a piece of iron that had fallen nearby. As one lunged at her, she swung her sword, hitting him square in the head. He fell, blood flowing. She trembled, but her gaze never wavered. Luca struggled to his feet, took the gun from the other man's hand, and pointed it at Mancini. It's over, Mancini sneered, unafraid. You don't have the guts to shoot me. I'm still the one who saved you from the streets. Without me, you're nothing. Luca squeezed the trigger, his hand shaking slightly. Memories flooded back the night he'd first fed him, the brutal lessons, the years he'd spent killing to survive. He'd been everything, and he'd turned him into a demon. Naomi stepped forward and took his hand. Luca, you don't have to become him to win. He looked at her, his eyes filled with tears, then lowered the gun. No, I'm not him. At that moment, a gunshot rang out. The bullet whizzed past, piercing Luca's shoulder. He fell. Vincent stood behind him, gun still in hand, his eyes wild. If you don't kill him, I will. But before he could fire another shot, Naomi picked up the gun that had fallen nearby and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit Vincent in the chest. He fell, eyes wide with disbelief. Mancini stood still, then burst out laughing hoarsely. So this girl is really one of my kind. Cold, precise, and willing to kill to protect what she loves. Naomi shuddered, shaking her head. No, I kill to finish what you started. She turned to help Luca. He was panting, his shirt soaked with blood, but he was still standing. Mancini pulled out his gun and aimed it at him. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be here today. You owe me your life. Luca raised his head, his eyes steady, And now, I return it to you. From afar. Police sirens blared. Red and blue lights flashed through the crack in the door. Mancini paused. Naomi had activated the recording button in her pocket earlier, transmitting the signal directly to the group of agents Luca had worked with. The warehouse door burst open. Police and agents rushed in, shouting, "Put down your weapons!" Mancini turned, his eyes wild. "You betrayed me again," Luca replied softly. "Not again, but for the last time." He pulled the trigger. The last bullet went through Mancini's chest. He fell, his eyes still open, a crooked smile on his face. Naomi caught Luca as he collapsed. Blood from his shoulder mixed with the rainwater on the ground. She clung to him, sobbing. "Luca, don't leave me. Please." He gave a weak smile. "You pulled me out of the darkness. Don't leave me to die in this light alone." The ambulance rushed in. The sound of rain mixed with the wailing of sirens, and flashing lights illuminated two figures hugging each other in the chaos, one falling, the other still holding on. The whole city of Chicago held its breath. St. Helena Hospital sat silently in downtown Chicago, its cold white lights illuminating its endless hallways. The steady hum of a heart monitor mingled with the distant sound of late-night rain. Naomi sat by the bed, holding Luca's hand tightly. His face was pale, a white bandage wrapped around his shoulder, but his breathing was steady. The doctors said he would live, and that was enough to make her heart feel 100 pounds lighter. She sat there, silent, just watching him sleep. The light filtered through the curtains, illuminating his face, the man who had once frightened her, angered her, and then made her love him until it hurt. Now, he was just a human being, wounded, vulnerable, and so close. The door to the room opened slightly. Agent Coleman, the person in charge of the case, walked in. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern but sympathetic look in his eyes. "Miss Naomi," he said softly, "we have identified the body of Salvatore Mancini. The investigation will be officially closed." But why, she asked? "You understand, people like Mancini are never alone. He has financial networks, allies, and many loyalists. Ending him doesn't mean the danger is gone." Naomi clenched her fists. "I don't care. As long as Luca lives, I'll do anything." Coleman nodded. "I believe you, but you have to be prepared. He won't be able to go back to normal life. With his record, we can't let him out in public." Naomi looked at him, her voice hoarse. "What do you mean Luca Marino is dead, at least on paper?" She was silent. The words stung like a knife. "No, you can't do that. He deserves to live, to be free. Sometimes the only freedom is to disappear." Coleman replied, "You know, Naomi, he was an underworld insider, now a witness against a bunch of bosses. We can't protect him while he's still under that name." She turned to look at Luca, tears falling without realizing it. "What about me? You will be protected, but the two of you cannot be together." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Naomi said nothing, just bowed her head, letting the tears fall onto his hands. 3 days later, Luca woke. His eyes were open, hazy, but when he saw Naomi, he smiled weakly. "I dreamed about you. Really?" She choked. "Yes, I was smiling, but the tears were still falling." The words made her cry. She took his hand and pressed it to her cheek. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." Luca sighed. "Just because you're alive doesn't mean you're free. They won't let you out." "Will they?" Naomi was silent, avoiding his gaze. Luca chuckled. "I know." He turned to the window. where the first rays of post-storm sunlight were shining on the city. I chose to end the war. Naomi, now it's your turn to choose how to live. I choose you, she said firmly. Luca turned back, his eyes deep. What if I am no longer Luca Marino? What if one day I am just another name? In another city, Naomi pursed her lips, tears welling up again. I will find you, wherever you are. He smiled softly. You don't need to search. Just live. And every time you see the sunrise, believe that I am seeing it with you, wherever I am. She hugged him, trembling. I hate these goodbyes. Me too, he whispered. But sometimes, true love is knowing when to let go. A week later, a quiet morning at a military airport outside Chicago. A black car pulled up. Naomi got out, a sealed letter in her hand. Luca, or whoever used to be that name, was waiting not far away. He wore a white shirt, his hair was cut short, and he looked completely different. Gone was the cold look of someone who once belonged to the darkness, only a man preparing to step into another life. You're here, he said. You promised to see me off for the last time. He nodded, holding out his hand. I have something to give you. From his pocket, he took out a small silver bracelet, engraved with the words Hope Rises. I made it before I came to the warehouse. If I didn't survive, you would have this to remember me by. Now, I want you to keep it to remember that there is always hope. Naomi looked at the bracelet, tears rolling down her face again. I will wear it every day. Coleman stepped forward and signaled, It's time. Luca turned to look at Naomi one last time. Their eyes met, no words needed, just a gentle sadness and a quiet trust. She said softly, Go, before I can't let go. He smiled, kissing her forehead lightly. I will always be here. His fingers touched her left chest, where her heart was still beating. Every beat is a time I miss you. She burst into tears as he turned away. He faded away, stepping onto the white plane. The door closed, the engine started, and then he disappeared into the sky. Naomi stood there, her hair blowing in the wind, her hands clutching the silver bracelet. She looked up at the sky, where bright sunlight filtered through the clouds. A final tear fell, and she smiled. Hope rises, she whispered, and I will live too, as you wish. Two years later, in a small beachside Florida cafe, a black woman was standing behind the counter, making coffee for customers. Her face was radiant and peaceful, and she still wore the same silver necklace around her neck. A male customer sat in the corner of the shop, wearing a cap, reading a newspaper. When she walked over to serve him, he looked up. Their eyes met. She paused. That look, she could never forget. The man smiled. A cappuccino, please, with little sugar, just like the first time we met. Naomi stood there, stunned, her heart pounding. Then she laughed, tears falling continuously. You're back, Luca just whispered. You promised. She rushed to hug him. Outside, the waves gently lapped against the shore, the wind blowing across the small wooden board in front of the cafe, which read, Hope Rises Cafe. The afternoon light shone down, embracing them. Two people once lost in the darkness, now finding each other again in peace. The early morning sky in Florida was a soft, warm, and gentle golden light. The ocean reflected a pink-orange color like a giant mirror. Seagulls circling lazily in the distance. The sound of waves lapping steadily against the shore was rhythmic, like the breath of a soul that had found peace. Naomi Carter opened the door to Hope Rises Cafe and took a deep breath. She still loved the smell of roasting coffee in the morning. Strong, rich, and full of memories. Each day began like a new healing. Over the past 2 years, she has learned to slow down. No more sleepless nights haunted by nightmares. No more gunshots. No more footsteps in the cold hallways. Just sunlight, the smell of baked goods, and the soft laughter of regular customers. But today, something was different. Maybe it was because of Luca Marino. The day he returned still felt like a dream. He was no longer a man of the shadows. He helped her manage the shop. Sometimes went to the fish market in the morning. Sometimes just sat on the porch, reading and making coffee. Life is so simple that sometimes Naomi can't believe it's real. She walked out to the kitchen and saw him standing next to the coffee maker, the sunlight shining through the window onto his face, quiet, experienced, but much gentler than before. "You're up so early," she asked, pouring water into the kettle. "I couldn't sleep," Luca replied, smiling. "I'm not used to this peace yet." Naomi chuckled. "You should get used to it. No one's chasing you anymore." He was silent, looking out to sea. A light breeze blew, carrying the scent of salt and sand. "Have you ever thought we could really escape?" Naomi paused. The question made her heart clench a little. "I don't know, but if we can still breathe, can still see each other every day, then maybe that's enough." Luca stepped closer and touched her shoulder. "You always know how to make things simple." "It's not simple," she replied softly. "It's just that I'm tired of complicated things." They looked at each other, a short but profound moment. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. A customer entered, a man in his 50s, tall, with graying hair, dressed casually, but with unusually sharp eyes. He smiled warmly. "Good morning. I hear this is the place with the best cappuccino in town." Naomi smiled professionally. "Yes. Which table are you sitting at?" "Right here." He sat by the window, facing the ocean. "Just like the sign says, 1. Hope rises. No sugar." Luca glanced over, his eyes changing slightly. Something in the man's voice and demeanor made him wary. He continued to make coffee, but his hand clenched slightly. Naomi brought out a cup of coffee and placed it in front of him. "Here you go. I hope you enjoy it." He took a sip and nodded. "It's excellent. It was worth driving nearly 200 miles to try it." Naomi smiled. "You live so far away." "Yes. I'm from New York. I work for an old financial institution. You might have heard of it. Giovanni Trust." Naomi paused. The name made her blood stop. "Luca, behind the counter." Paused, his eyes flashing. "Giovanni Trust, one of Mancini's money laundering subsidiaries." The man looked at them, smiling slightly. "Oh, don't worry. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just curious. I heard someone who used to work for Mancini is living peacefully here. I wanted to see if he really washed his hands of the gun." The air froze. Naomi tried to keep her composure. "You're wrong. There are only people who make coffee and people who like to drink it." The man chuckled. "Maybe. But you know, the past is not something that can be easily erased. It just sleeps, until someone wakes it up." He stood up and put the money down on the table. "The coffee is excellent. Say hello to your husband. Naomi Carter, no, Naomi Marino." Naomi was stunned. She had never told anyone her real name. When the door closed, Luca was behind her. He looked out, his eyes dark. "He knows everything." Luca. Maybe he just guessed. No, He knows. And if he knows, others will know too. The darkness is returning. She squeezed his hand. We won't run away again. Luca, not again. This is our home. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. If they come, I won't let you get hurt. That night, it rained again. The rain was like any other Chicago night, cold, long, and heavy. Naomi couldn't sleep. She went out onto the porch and watched the waves in the night. Luca stepped back, draping his coat around her shoulders. What are you thinking, I think? Maybe we can never truly escape the past. Maybe, he said softly, but we can learn to live with it. She turned to look at him. Aren't you scared? I was. But when I saw you, I knew there was nothing scarier than losing you again. Naomi leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. I just want to live in peace. Open the shop every morning and sit like this every night. Me too. Luca smiled slightly. And if anyone dares to take that away, I will make them regret it. She looked up, looking into his eyes. In the dim light of the porch, those eyes were no longer those of an assassin, but of a man trying to protect the little thing he loved most. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Luca squeezed her hand. I'll call Coleman tomorrow. We need to know what Giovanni Trust is doing. Naomi nodded. A vague fear rose in her heart, but also a new strength. They had survived hell. Nothing in this world could bring them down again. Outside, the rain was still falling, but in that small house by the sea, two people sat next to each other, their hands clasped tightly together, as if they could fight the world with only faith and love. Lightning flashed, illuminating the wall where a small photograph hung in the middle of the room. It showed Naomi and Luca standing in front of the cafe, with the words below "Hope rises" from where the shadows used to cover. They chose to live, not to forget the past, but to turn the past into a reason to be stronger. The next morning, the Florida sky was a pale gray, and a mist lingered on the palm trees in front of Hope Rises Cafe. Naomi Carter made coffee as usual, but her hands were shaking. The uneasiness from last night still lingered. Luca was quieter than usual. He sat at the wooden table, his eyes glued to the screen of his phone, which displayed a security map of the area. Don't worry, Naomi, he said, his voice low. I contacted Coleman. He said he'd have someone watching Giovanni Trust. It seems they're just testing your reaction. Naomi put down her coffee cup. But what if they don't? What if they want to pull you back? Luca smiled, a soft smile. They'll have to walk over you. She narrowed her eyes, her voice low. I hate it when you say that. I know. He touched her cheek. But sometimes, to keep the peace, we have to face what we've run from. Outside, the waves continued to crash. Everything seemed so peaceful that it seemed as if nothing could touch them. But they both knew that sometimes peace was the thinnest mask of a storm. In the afternoon, Naomi was cleaning the shop when a strange black car stopped in front of the door. The window rolled down, revealing the face of the man from the day before. Mr. Gray, the one who had mentioned Giovanni Trust. He smiled, did not enter, but placed an envelope on the counter. For Luca Marino, he said softly. Do not open it before dinner. Naomi was about to ask, but the car had already driven away, its tires screeching on the wet asphalt. She held the envelope in her hand, a strange anxiety rising in her heart. Luca stepped out, saw the envelope, and frowned slightly. Who gave it to you? It was him. The guy from the other day. He took it and tore the seal. Inside was only a photograph of Naomi, smiling by the shop door, and handwritten words scrawled on the back. "The debt is not over." They both looked at each other, silent. Without needing to say anything, they both understood. The past had truly returned. "I will," Luca said firmly. "They want to threaten us, but they forget that we are not the same people." "No, Luca," Naomi replied, her eyes shining but her voice trembling. "I don't want to live in fear anymore. We can't just run or fight. There has to be another way." He looked at her, his eyes filled with love and suspicion. Another way exposed them. One last time. That evening, the wind blew off the sea, carrying the smell of salt and cold. Luca called Coleman. "I want you to trace the finances of Giovanni Trust. If they're still active, there's a trace." Coleman was silent for a moment. "Luca, do you understand what that means? You're digging up a part of Mancini that you helped build." "That's why," Luca said. "I know where to start." Naomi sat beside him, her hand holding his, her eyes steady. "We do it together." 3 days later, the two of them set off for Miami, where Giovanni Trust's underground office was located. As Naomi drove, she looked at the skyscrapers along Interstate 95, her heart filled with memories. She remembered her days at the Everly, a place of yellow lights and fake smiles. "I used to think justice was so far away," she said softly. "But now I think justice can start with just telling the truth." Luca smiled. "I love how you believe in the good, even when it hurts." At night, they arrived at the old office complex along the beach, an abandoned building with a few windows still lit. Luca opened his leather bag and took out his laptop, some data access devices, and a small gun. "This time we won't fight," Naomi said, smiling. "This time we'll play with numbers." They hacked into the system, followed the money trail. Numbers popped up, familiar names, politicians, businessmen, even fake charities. Giovanni Trust wasn't just laundering money. It was buying up legitimate organizations to cover up Mancini's criminal network. Naomi held her breath, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Luca, this is the proof you need." He nodded, his eyes shining, "and Coleman will know what to do with it." Suddenly there was a noise in the hallway. Someone was coming. Luca signaled. They both ducked behind the desk. The door opened and a familiar voice called out. "Not bad. Marino, I know you can't sit still. Mr. Gray entered, followed by 2 armed men. He looked around, his eyes sharp. "You were Mancini's best man. It would be a waste to let you die in Chicago." Luca stepped out, his hands raised. "What do you want, collaboration?" Again, "Mancini is dead, but his empire needs a successor. And you, Luca, were born to do it." Naomi stepped out too. "You're crazy. He never went back to the shadows. Mr. Gray laughed, his eyes glancing at her. "And you, Naomi, you testified against the system, but you think the system is gone." Luca stepped forward, his voice low. "I used to think I could clean up the blood by leaving. But now I know. The only way to clean it up is to end it all." For a moment, their eyes met. Luca sprang into action. He lunged forward, knocking down one of the guards, then kicked the gun toward Naomi. She grabbed it and aimed it at Mr. Gray. "I don't want to kill you," she said, her voice trembling, "but I will if you take one more step." Gray chuckled, raising his hands in surrender. "You think justice will protect you. Justice only exists when you have the power to uphold it." "Maybe," Naomi replied, her eyes lighting up. But at least we have the truth. Luca activated the recording device, sending all the data he had just collected to Coleman. A small light flashed on the screen. The signal had been transmitted successfully. Gray stepped back, his face dark. "You have no idea what you've set off." Luca smiled coldly. "Perhaps. But this time, I won't run away." Police sirens echoed in the street. Gray turned to hide, but the police had already stormed in. Coleman appeared in a black suit, his voice firm. "Mr. Gray, you are under arrest for financing and operating an international money laundering organization." Naomi sighed in relief, leaning against Luca's shoulder. He held her tight, the two of them surrounded by papers, monitors, and the flashing lights of the Secret Service. Coleman looked at them, smiling slightly. "You two really don't know how to live in peace," Luca replied, half joking. "Maybe it's because we were born to find light in the darkness."
A week later, Hope Rises Cafe reopened. Naomi stood by the window, watching the sunset turn the sky golden. Luca was making coffee, the sunlight on his shoulders, gentle and peaceful. "Do you think we are really out?" she asked.
"Perhaps never quite," he replied, "but at least now the darkness has to fear us." Naomi smiled. She handed him a cappuccino, a small heart on the top. "To the one who taught me to see the light, even in the dark." Luca clinked his glass against hers. "And to the one who made me believe that love can be the beginning of justice." Outside, the sun was setting, leaving a red-orange glow reflecting off the sea. They stood side by side, silent, but both knew in their hearts that no matter how many challenges lay ahead, they were no longer afraid, because for the first time ever, they were truly free. This story reminds us that true strength often comes from the quietest souls. Naomi Carter didn't fight back with violence, anger, or revenge. She fought with patience, intelligence, and unshakable dignity. Her story isn't just about justice, it's about transformation. It shows us that no matter how ordinary we seem, we each hold the power to change the world around us when we refuse to bow to injustice. For older viewers, it's a reminder that wisdom and composure can win battles that brute force never could. It tells us that every humiliation, every moment of pain, can become evidence of strength if we choose to stand tall and act with purpose. In a time when prejudice still lingers and people are too quick to judge, this story whispers a timeless truth. Respect has nothing to do with power, money, or color. It comes from character. So, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to be reminded that dignity and courage are stronger than fear. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to discover more stories that inspire hope, strength, and justice, stories that prove the quietest voices often carry the loudest truths.